There you go.
I had a question about the composition of our lit review. So, the paper was saying that we needed to summarize and synthesize, but do that without paraphrasing.
Right.
And also it was saying to use quotes sparingly.
Right.
So I get the feel that we're going to be making an argument, but also I don't want it to turn out to be like he said, she said, they said, this person said, and then like, I just want to get. I'm like kind of afraid that I might paraphrase to avoid using quotes, and then in doing that risk maybe plagiarism or just how do you think we should go about kind of crafting the composition of it?
Well, so I think really you're going to have to find models.
Okay.
But let me give you let me just summarize for you the way that I wrote a lit review that I think might be helpful as a way to think about like a model. Okay, so I was writing this paper about immigrant youth and families and the relationship between home and school and how that relationship between home and school is experienced by immigrant parents, Haitian immigrant parents. So I wanted to make the argument that although in the literature what we have is a binary construction of in school versus out of school kind of relationships, what the reality is somewhere in between, right? So I said, one thread of the literature says that home and school are sort of like inherently like at odds with each other, right? So they're inherently different, the cultures are different, everything is different, and so I would go through and say, for instance, studies have found that teachers come from really different cultural background than students, and then I would cite that, and I might cite like two different articles that had that reported in their findings, and then I might go along and say, another issue is language. As we know, language is really important, and the language that students use should be recognized at school. And then I might cite that because that's also something that's been found in research that like it's important for kids to hear their language and see themselves reflected in class. And then another thing is that that kids that the literature also says that they're so different from each other because of like institutional racism and sexism and so on. And so then I might I'm making these sort of like lead sentences that are gonna help me, that I'm gonna flesh out in the paragraph, and then I'm supporting my statements in the flesh out paragraph with literature. So it's really reflecting not so much a summary or a report of what each study found, but what I think, like what sense I make of what is being put out there. Okay, and then I have then I said, so that's one branch of the literature. Another branch of the literature says actually home and school are completely, they're like that it's a false binary, and that home and school actually they're closely interconnected, and that these binaries are not reflective of the reality, and blah blah blah. So then I sort of would go through and say like my paragraphs would sort of lead with these sentences of basically what I want to say about each of those points, supporting that main thing, which is that this other branch of the literature says that home and school there is no difference. And then I said, but what I want to argue with my findings is that sometimes parents create deliberate distance between home and school. So then it becomes a matter of like going beyond the conversation about a binary or a non-binary. And actually I was talking about building bridges between home and school. So I was saying sometimes parents actually deliberately choose not to build bridges, and here's why. Here are some of the experiences of the parents that I interviewed. And so for them, schooling represented Americanization, and they were resisting Americanization. They were not resisting schooling. They're not resisting parent-teacher relationships. They're not resisting any of those things. But according to a lot of other research, that's why parents don't get involved. Parents aren't involved because they don't care. Parents aren't involved because they're too busy. Parents aren't involved because whatever. Well, what about the fact that maybe there's just other stuff going on? For instance, that school represents American culture, and that's something that is intimidating for these parents. And so their hesitancy is actually hesitancy about something bigger and has to do with like a bigger story about immigration and assimilation, and you know what I mean? So it's sort of like, that's where, and because I knew what my finding was, I was able to make the argument knowing what my like once I knew, you know, what the story was going to be, the really interesting story about like, look at that, you know, these parents are not rejecting, they're rejecting, but they're not rejecting for the reasons we think, then I could build a lit review around, you know, these ideas. But you can still, even without that, like even if you don't know your findings, because when I was writing my lit reviews for grad school, for my thesis and my dissertation, I didn't have findings. That's what you do when you're actually writing like a research article where you already know what you're finding. But you are weaving sort of like statements and impressions and summaries and your own thoughts, but you're supporting those with literature. So you're citing the literature to support the points that you're making, if that makes any sense. And let me just pause and say, one of the reasons why this feels a little bit intimidating to you all is because you don't feel yet like you have expertise, and you don't feel yet like you have the right to have an opinion or the right to sort of like make declarations about how things are or are not. And that's totally normal, and it takes until you graduate to start to feel even a little bit like you can do that, okay? So as I'm saying this, just recognize that I know that you're going to feel like, I don't know what I'm talking about. And that's why, like, the earlier student is in his or her research career, the more direct quotes that student uses. Because it's like, well, I'm just going to rely on the experts. I'm not an expert. But something that I think is really useful just in terms of writing in general, not even necessarily academic writing, but in terms of direct quotes, I read something that really helped me because I used to use them a lot too early on. And that was, in order to use a direct quote, that thing has to be said so well that it would not be possible for you to say it better. Just not possible. But like a definition, you can rewrite a definition. That definition is not like, you know, just, oh my goodness, listen to that term now. You know, like a quote, it's like, it should just make you weep. You should just be like, my God, this person can write their butt off. I have to say it just like this. Not just, oh man, I don't know how to paraphrase this and it's too complicated and, you know, whatever. Just work on it. You know, if your issue is not that you're not sure, then break it down and work on it. But direct quotes should be saved for those moments of like, oh, this is beautiful writing.
They just end up being so hard to read. Because, like, you ever get that at the point in an article where, like, it's a paragraph of parenthetical footnotes, and you're like, I don't know how to read this because I literally cannot see your text in between your footnotes. I guess it happens like a bunch of times. It'll be like, I've seen in, like, this little study, and then this part, and this study, and then, like, I'm just like, I'm just going to skip that paragraph because I cannot read it.
Yeah, I try not to do that. I try to do my, like, at the end. I'll write a sentence and then I'll have, like, you know, 7 citations at the end, which can be annoying to other people because they're like, well, that idea, like, that article actually, you know, that comes from the beginning of your sentence, but it's annoying to read, you know? So I go back and forth, but I try to keep it, especially if it's a longer sentence, then I try to keep away from doing too much of the, like, as some studies have shown, 25 citations. You know, people like to eat 25 citations, a lot of food, you know, which sometimes, you know, you read articles, you're like, really? So when you see those examples, that's not what you want to do. No. Find a model article, you know, find the article that you love to read the most when you were looking for when you were reading it, like the one that was the most elegant, the more that you felt like, this is so, like, well put, and it's very simple, and I can understand it. That's your model article, and just model your paper after that. Model their approach to the lit review, model their approach to the methods. Because if you enjoyed reading it, then it means that it's understandable, relatable, and that's what you're trying to do as well. You're right, you're trying to write a paper that is, you know, accessible.
In lit review, our methods could be like what we hope to do, or what we think we're gonna do, because I'm not starting methods till like
right, your methods section is written all in the future tense. When you're writing a proposal.
I hate writing in future tense. It's like, I will be, I should be, I can,
yeah.
And they're just like, I sound like an idiot.
But that's how you have to do it until you actually have the, and then you say, I did, I, measured, I called, I interviewed. But for now, you say, I will, and just declare it. Like, obviously you can't control the future, but you just say, I will interview 14 people. If you end up interviewing 12, then when you write the actual final report, you say, I interviewed 12 people. But go with what you're planning to do, because that's all you can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one way that, because I'm taking Mir's class now, and one way she teaches the lit review is, finding, like you said, finding a thread in the literature. So she said to us, find a common theme that you found in a lot of the literature. And I thought that was, that was really helpful for me. And then, her other option was to do it, chronologically. If that's more for your purposes as well, do the research that came out 50 years ago and how it's progressed till today or something like that. Yeah. So you could do it thematically or chronologically.
Yeah. This article said you could do it chronologically, which would make sense if you're trying to document again sort of where the research has been and where it's going, or you could do it thematically, or you could do it methodologically. If what you're actually interested in, say you're interested in developing a measure, you might be interested in writing your lit review around how other people have measured this thing that you're trying to measure, and you're creating a new measure, so you want to point out the strengths and weaknesses of the other measures, right? So, some people have measured it using quantitative, and then you'll give examples. Some people have done qualitative, some people have done mixed methods. Something along those lines would also be an appropriate way to organize your lit review. We'll just have to kind of see where things are. Make sense?
It just feels really long. It feels I feel like every time I think about 6 to 8, I'm like, what am I gonna say for 3 pages? What?
So then start with 3 pages. Start with 2. Start with 1.
I can probably do 1.
Yeah. You can do 1. You can do 1. And something else is, I was going to tell you, actually, Talia, specifically just because you were talking about yours. So, and this is the kind of workshopping that we can do next week, but we can also start some of it this week. So, for instance, you're talking about the difference between theory and practice. Well, there's a whole literature out there, or multiple literatures, depending on field, about the difference between theory and practice. So something that you'll probably want to do in your lit review is say, there has been a lot said about, that there's a gap between theory and practice. For instance, this person, blah, blah, blah. I'm interested to know whether that's true in this, this particular area that I'm focusing on or whatever. So that's another thing is, thinking also about, what kind of theoretical things have been said about your work. I mean, we haven't talked a whole lot about theory. I haven't emphasized sort of needing to, forcing you to include a theory section, but it's probably going to be helpful for you to find at least one article that's more theoretical focused, whether it's developmental theory, whether it's Vygotsky in context or learning, whether it's theories about class, for example. There's this research by Melvin Cohn that's really famous about class. There's also the work of oh my goodness, it's going to escape me for a second, but there's this article called Class as Habitus. So there are different ways, that people think about these things. You can include that and should include it as a way to help you. That also will help you sort of frame how you're thinking about things, because a theory or these are things that give you sort of what's my structure, what's sort of the architecture, and then you can add the stuff onto it, which is the literature. But it also really helps you to frame things. So I would encourage you all to look into 1 or 2 theories that you can look to and say I'm going to borrow from this theory, or say my article is informed by so-and-so's, whatever argument that children develop in context, which means the family and the school is important, and blah, blah. For my study, I'm focusing on the school. It doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be anything super elaborate, but it will help you to feel like you're not just sort of abruptly, entering the conversation, It'll help you with, the setup and background, the narrative of the story. Like, how did we come to care about this? You know, kind of thing.
Is there even like a theorist we haven't studied, but all our articles keep referencing, and we're hoping?
Then for sure,
Oh,
you will want to
yeah.
read at least one of those articles that they keep referencing.
Super dense linguistic articles. I'm just so excited.
Yeah, so you can say, you know, like most of the literature in this area, you know, borrows from this theory and keep. So I'm following this. I also will be. Doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to make it fancy. It can be a few sentences. It can be a short paragraph, but it will ground you. You'll feel better.
Are we meeting with you on Thursday?
Thursday?
Oh, I made that up.
Does that happen a lot?
Yeah, it does. Well, I don't know why. I thought we were meeting with you like at another point. I don't know. Forget it.
Let me just.
It doesn't
check
chase
my
out
calendar.
on the syllabus.
Are you sure?
Yeah, next week is workshopping the lit review, and then December 11th is our presentations of work accomplished to date.
Yeah, which is just like us, not the.
Is it like just us sitting and discussing it?
Yeah.
Or is it like
No, it's not PowerPoint. It's just like everybody individually says, like, here's what I've done so far, here's, you know, just like tell us the story of what's going on and give us like a summary of your literature. Give us your, you know, what theory you're using and what method you're planning to use and, you know, kind of where you are, how it's going. Like, tell us how things are going.
So we're not meeting with you Thursday.
So you're not meeting with me Thursday. I'm just seeing you next Tuesday.
Okay.
That's good though. I'm here on Thursday, so if you want to meet with me, you can. But, yeah.
So when I was doing the annotated bibliography and I didn't pay attention to dates, probably should have, but I kind of skipped over it and I realized, well, Joan brought it to my attention that I had some articles from like 1991. But it happens that article was the one that I thought was kind of my key article and was really relevant to what I was interested in.
Totally.
So is there a cutoff date that you think?
There's no cutoff date. What you want to be careful of is that all your articles are not from 1991.
Okay.
So if you have a range and like, you know, you can get the bulk of your articles within the last 10 years, then that's ideal. But then if, like, sometimes, you know, the piece is from 1972. Nobody's ever said anything more brilliant since then. And so that's the one that everybody references, and that's totally fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now everyone's gonna go check.
Yeah, yeah.
I
It's
already
good.
checked.
It's a good thing to check. So something else that I wanted to talk about is citation style. So for the annotated bibliography, I didn't specify it, but just make sure that when you're turning in your draft, that your references are in either APA or MLA, whichever one you choose, but choose one and be consistent.
Oh, we
with
can
it.
choose. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought we had to do APA.
Oh no.
Okay.
I know RefWorks asked me. RefWorks told me I should. Said NYU prefers APA. Are you sure you want to use MLA?
Oh, that's so funny.
They did.
Oh,
They had
that's
like
funny.
they had like a list of like it said New
I
York,
was sad
New
on
York
RefWorks.
University students tend to use this one. It gave me like a list of 4,
Or probably because that's just the more common one.
and they just said like, but you
Yeah.
can use these also.
Yeah, that's funny.
Thanks, RefWorks. It totally needs your approval.
Exactly. Good thing I checked with you, RefWorks, whatever.
It's a godsend. I am obsessed
It is-
with
it is
RefWorks.
great.
I really love
The only thing you have to be careful of is, like, APA is funny. Like, you're not supposed to do titles with the capital letter of each thing capitalized. And a lot of times in the
I like that.
summary thing, like, you like it all lowercase.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. But it's more like a sentence. And so, anywho, like, it's just, you know, I'm all about RefWorks. I actually use something called EndNote, which is very similar. And I'm all about it. But just know that it's a computer program. It's not a brain. It's not a person. So know that you need to, like, go back to, like, OWL, for example, that we talked about, the OWL website at Purdue University, and just, you know, look it up and check and see if, make sure that everything is accurate and correct.
Did your phone just buzz?
Yes. Sorry.
No.
No, I just wanted to like make sure you heard it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, just need to check this last. Okay. Things are okay. So, any other questions? So these guides, writing introductions, writing transitions, writing conclusions for next week, very similar, like very helpful, like the writing literature reviews. I feel like they break things down so simply that if you literally followed it step by step, you would feel like you're like, oh, I can totally do this. Because they really do make it very formulaic. And remember, I think like one of the very first, if not the first class, one of the first things I said is academic writing is a genre. It's formulaic. It's got a very standard set of, practices, norms, expectations. So just follow that. That's why I say find a model article. You won't go wrong. If you start going rogue and trying to be all like, creative or whatever, then you might end up in some problems. It's not the time to try to get fancy.
Well, I don't know. Like, I kind of disagree.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think like, because the lit review that I wrote for Mira I had a lot of fun with, because it was like, she sort of like allowed us to be like sort of like creative. Like I was doing like multilingualism in schools or whatever, and a lot of the literature I was looking at about teaching standard English was like dealt a lot with like the classroom space and also like getting to know students on a personal level and identity and stuff. So Mira was like, oh, why don't you do like a section of your lit review called just like space, and like a section called dimension, and then like sort of like fit all the literature into one of those categories, and like it ended up being like kind of fun, and it sort of like dictated the style of the writing in a way. So I don't know. I think it can be creative a little bit. Not
it's still a formula
crazy,
though.
yeah.
You still had to do sections, and you still had to do a lit review.
It's true,
But yeah, I mean, you like definitely. And in my own writing, I actually try to violate that very hard. But this is not what you guys are. Yeah, I really do. I really try to like push it a little bit, and because academic writing can be very boring, but that's just not what your objective is for this. You know what I mean? You're just trying to like write your very first. This is your first try at everything. So you don't have to feel the pressure of now I also have to, be really like funky and whatever. But yeah, organizing it around themes like that, like space, dimension, time, whatever, that's fine. Yeah. Whatever themes are relevant. So, any other questions? I can see the stress. I'm like, you guys are just, I know. This time of the semester is just rough. So.
It's like you can see the end of the tunnel, and then there's like a huge alligator right in front of it.
And you're like, it's actually about to swallow me right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually realized, so I apologize in advance, and maybe if you guys want, I can do this next semester, but I realized after we met that like the very first thing that we should do in this class is discuss time management. And I should give you guys, because I have a very elaborate and very effective time management program that I use for myself.
Wait, next semester, can you just have like more due dates, which sounds counterproductive, but like if it was like when we had like Dr. Nero talking and we had nothing due, if you had been like have like half of your bibliography due, and like to like maybe structure it more so that we just to like help us manage ourselves, something like that, because I'm really looking for that.
Because a lot of people need deadlines. A lot of people need deadlines and are not as good about setting their own deadlines.
Even if I don't make it, like I'm just happy to know that
to
I
have one,
it.
right, yeah.
Like some sort of goal.
Yeah, even if it was like just a timeline that said like by this date you should be kind of here, by this date you should be kind of here, even if it's not necessarily having to turn something in per se, but just to give you a sense of where you should be, and if you're not there, like how far you have to go. Yeah. Okay, that sounds great. So you want to hear?
Yes, please. I'm dying.
Oh yeah, it really is like it really requires a lot of self-discipline. But basically, I was sharing with Ela that I do something that's called the Sunday meeting, which is when I plan my week. On Sunday, I sit down with my calendar, and I use Google Calendar because it allows me to color code, and it's really effective for me. So I have at my Sunday meet. Well, so I always, at the beginning of the semester, I always set up my calendar. I put in my classes. I put in my faculty meetings, department meetings, any other committee meetings, anything that's sort of like firm goes in. My kids, like school breaks, like everything. So it just all goes into the calendar, and everything has a different color. And then each week I sit down, and I know that I need to write every day. And I generally try to keep the same writing time every day. So I try to write every day between 9 and 11. So I put that into my calendar. Some things like faculty meetings are in the mornings. So on the days that I have meetings that I cannot avoid, so I do not set any meetings. That's my sacred time. And I actually told Ela, you do have a meeting. It's called the Butt in Seat meeting, BIS. So it's the BIS meeting from 9 to 11 every day. Somebody says, hey, you want to go for coffee? I'm sorry, I'm in a meeting. That's all. Like, I don't need to say what meeting with whom. I'm in a meeting. But then I can say I'm available to meet with you after 11:30, or I'm available to meet with you, 11:15 or whatever. Faculty meeting, I can't be like, you guys are interpreting my writing time. So then what I do is I will move my writing time to fit around that. And my writing time comes before anything else. So, my teaching and my meetings, like, that's established. And then I plug in my writing time. Then once my writing time for every day has been blocked in, then I start looking at my task list and, like, what are the different things that I need to do? Go to the dry cleaners, finish this article review, grade a paper, whatever. And I put in those things based on, like, priority after my set in stone things have been put in. So for you all, like, maybe writing every day is not going to be your set in stone thing, but like reading every day, or, time for working on, this assignment or whatever. Like, you can even have writing time every day, but for you guys it would be a little slightly different than what it means for me. But you basically, like, make a commitment to yourself that you pay yourself first, and that other people can wait, and other people's emergencies are not yours, and you have to get your stuff done first. And then you block in the other things, and then you block in leisure time, you block in, like, making sure that you're taking care of yourself. But it helps because then you can, like, on Sunday, you feel like you are going into the week prepared, and you know what's coming. Stuff isn't just going to hit you out of left field because you sat down and you were like, okay, and this is what the week has in store for me. It's very, very effective, and I love it. I've been doing it for years.
So, I was actually reading online, and I thought it was really funny, but it was really helpful because it was funny. So, there's this guy, I don't know who, but the way he studies is he has his textbook out like this.
Were the jelly beans?
No, it was gummy bears.
Gummy bears.
So he puts a gummy bear on each paragraph, so when he finishes the paragraph, he rewards himself with a gummy bear. So that's how he gets through all of 3 years.
How old is this guy?
I don't know.
College. Somebody made fun of it.
Does he still have
and then
teeth?
just poured
Yeah,
over their
exactly.
textbook.
You know how many calories it is a day? Like, if
If
like,
you did that
if
for
you're
everything you had
reading,
to read?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my
I mean,
God.
if it works, it works.
Right, I guess.
I do that sometimes too. Like, if I do 10 minutes of reading, I can do like 30 minutes of Facebook.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Well, obviously in my mind it's like 10 minutes, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It doesn't work out that way.
Yeah,
ever.
yeah, but it's still good to give yourself rewards, like
So,
that's
but
important.
then you get into that, like, the bad thing. Like, I talked about this with a friend, so I'm not the only one who does this. I reward myself with bathroom breaks. It's like, if you finish this
true.
article,
Yeah, that's
you can go to the bathroom.
I do that
Like,
too.
you cannot go to the bathroom until you finish this article.
Torture.
You're just, like, sitting there, like, praying to, like, keep focused so you can go to the bathroom.
Yeah, I might choose a different reward system.
It doesn't work all the time,
Yeah.
but, like, if it, like, coincides,
Yeah.
then, like, you just...
Well, sometimes sometimes I'm just too into it. I'm like, I can't. Like, I just don't want to stop right now. I have, like, I set timers. So I'm like, I only have 10 more minutes. Because I do, like, I have I work with other writers, and we have a Skype writing group. I also have an on-site writing group. But we'll set like 30-minute challenge, like 30 minutes, all focus, like you just writing, nothing else. Or if you're reading, like focus reading, nothing else, 30 minutes. So then it'll be like, oh, it's 10. I only have 10 minutes. Like I can wait to go to the bathroom. It's only 10 minutes. I don't want to stop and then have to be like, hey everybody, I have to take a break. So I hear you, but it's not. I wouldn't recommend it.
No, it's not like I recommend it. It's just like if it happens to work, then occasionally
funny. Yeah,
it helps out.
One of my English recitation leaders told me a really good strategy to help get writing flowing. She said a lot of the times when we stop writing, it's when you're done with an idea, and then the next day you have to sit there and like think about what your next idea is, and it wastes time because you like it takes a while to get that engine running. So she said it's always a good idea to stop in the middle of like when you know what you're going to say, like stop in mid-sentence in a sentence that you're like really worked up about, and you're not going to lose that idea. So then when the next day you come back to it, you're like, oh, okay, I know where I'm going. And then you start writing right away. And that's just being productive. So, like, things just get rolling from there.
Yeah. And if you write every day, that happens. That really happens. When you write every day, you are in conversation with yourself. And you think about, like, and you just can't wait to come back. You're just like, oh, and I've got to finish this paragraph. Or I've got to finish this thought or whatever. And you can stop in the middle of a sentence. And you know that you're coming back. So, okay.